Picture a hallway full of obstacles. A trash can, a chair, a stack of boxes dead center. Now picture a man walking through it. No cane, no hand on the wall, no hesitation. He steps around every single one. Here's the part that should bother you. He is completely blind. Both of his visual cortices are destroyed. The part of the brain that turns light into a picture gone. So who's steering him around the boxes? This isn't a trick. It's a real patient known in the research only by his initials TN. 2 strokes days apart wiped out the back of his brain, the region that builds conscious sight. By every test doctors had, he was blind. Totally. He couldn't see a hand waving in front of his face. Then, in 2008, a team led by neuroscientist Beatrice de Gelder walked him down that cluttered hallway anyway. He didn't know the obstacles were there. He'll tell you to this day he didn't see them. He just walked, and somehow his body already knew. That's called blindsight. And once you learn it exists, a much darker question opens up. If a man with a destroyed visual cortex can still dodge a box he insists he never saw, what exactly is doing the seeing? Hold that thought. It gets stranger before it gets clearer. Blindsight isn't one freak case. It's been documented since the 1970s when psychologist Lawrence Weisskranz first named it, studying a man he called DB. DB had part of his visual cortex removed to stop violent seizures. Afterward, he swore he saw nothing on one side of his vision. Total blank. Weisskranz flashed a light in DB's blind field and asked him to just point at it, not describe it. Not admit he saw it. Just guess if he had to. DB pointed at it almost every time. He wasn't guessing. He was refusing to believe his own accuracy. Here's why the eerie feeling is justified. Your eyes don't send one signal to one place. They send information down at least 10 separate pathways into the brain. Most goes to the visual cortex, the part that builds the picture you're aware of. But an older route runs to a structure called the superior colliculus, a piece of brain your ancestors were using to dodge predators long before anything on Earth had a cortex. When the newer pathway is destroyed, the older one keeps working. It tracks motion. It tracks location. It steers your hand and your feet. It just never files a report with the part of you that experiences anything. So there is a version of seeing happening in these patients right now, and they are the last to know about it. Now flip the situation. Instead of someone who sees more than they know, meet the people who see things that are not there at all. In 1760, a Swiss naturalist named Charles Bonnet was recording strange reports from his grandfather who was going blind from cataracts. The old man described men in odd hats, buildings that didn't exist, a woman in a shawl standing perfectly still in the middle of the room. He knew none of it was real. He said so every time. Then it kept happening anyway. Doctors now believe roughly 1 in 5 people with significant vision loss experience something like this. Doctors call it Charles Bonnet Syndrome. Most patients call it something else quietly to themselves. Because they're terrified someone will decide they've lost their mind. The images aren't random static. People describe fully detailed faces, parades of tiny figures walking along a bookshelf, patterns of brickwork tiling across a blank wall over and over like wallpaper. One woman studied by neurologist Oliver Sacks described strangers in Victorian dress appearing in her apartment, going about their business, ignoring her completely. She had almost no functional vision left. Her brain still produced scenes with more detail than most people can consciously imagine with their eyes wide open. If the eyes have gone dark, where is the picture coming from? Same answer as before, from the opposite direction. Your visual cortex isn't a screen that only turns on when light hits your retina. It's a machine built to constantly guess what should be there using whatever input it can get. Cut off its main supply of real images and it doesn't shut down. It starts filling the silence with its own material patterns and faces pulled from a lifetime of stored visual memory played back with no signal telling it to stop. The frightening part isn't that this happens. It's how ordinary it is. Doctors gave it a name over 260 years ago, and most people still haven't heard of it. There's a third piece, and it's the one that should really sit with you. In the early 2000s, a neuroscientist named Maurice Patito ran an experiment using a device that looks almost absurd on paper. A small electrode grid placed on the tongue wired to a camera. The camera looks at the room. The grid translates the image into a pattern of tiny electrical pulses on the tongue, a kind of braille made of static. Congenitally blind volunteers trained with the device a few hours a day. Within weeks, some could identify shapes across a room, track a moving object, find a doorway. Tito scanned their brains while they used it. The visual cortex, the part that had never done its intended job in these people, not once in their entire lives, lit up. It processed the pulses on the tongue as if they were light. Nobody had planned for that. The visual cortex didn't require eyes. It required information about the shape of the world arriving on any channel that could carry it. Put these three things next to each other, and the picture stops being about eyes at all. A man with no working visual cortex who still dodges obstacles he insists he never saw. A woman with no meaningful eyesight left watching strangers in Victorian dress move through her apartment. A person born blind learning to see a doorway through pulses on their tongue. None of these are edge cases the field forgot to explain. They're the same fact showing up from three different directions. Seeing was never really about the eyes. The eyes are just one possible door into a system built to model the world no matter what information it's given or not given at all. Which brings back the question from the start, and it's worse the second time you hear it. If a blind man's body can steer around a box, his mind never registered what is your brain doing right now in this exact second that you also don't know about? There's no clean answer to that. Nobody's fully mapped it. That's not a comforting place to leave you, and it isn't supposed to be. Here's the one thing that is settled, and it's the part worth keeping. Blindness was never one condition with one experience attached to it. Losing your eyes doesn't erase perception. It relocates it into older pathways, into memory, into whatever other channel the brain can recruit. The system underneath you was never just a camera. It was always a guessing machine wearing a camera as one of its many disguises, and it does not stop guessing just because the camera goes dark.